volunteers. I hope we have up on the board. I asked Lucille to put up on the board washtenadems.org/volunteer. We are by far the busiest, most complicated county party in this state. We do so much work. Thank you. And it's not me, it's all of these volunteers that we have. And we need more. We always need more, especially in an election year. So, like this year, we're doing a bunch of things. One of the things we're doing is improv. We're working with some improv actors to loosen us up before we do tabling and doors, because I don't know about you, sometimes I get anxious about going to doors or talking to people, especially in this climate. So we've done some work with improv actors, and we're going to be keeping that up to just understand what it is to just get to know somebody easily. We're also, we need help with events. Please, if you'd like to do events, let us know. WashingtonDems.org/volunteers. Cutting turfs in van. Hang on, I've got just scribbled notes here. Oh yeah, fundraising. If you just want to, everybody at once. Who wants to fundraise? Wow. It's ever thus. Okay, anyway, but if you're like that oddball who really likes to fundraise, WashingtonDems.org/volunteer. Or actually, if you're the oddball who likes to fundraise, just do it to chair at WashingtonDems.org, because we can talk. We will talk. I'd love that. You'll be my new favorite person. And let's see what else. Oh, and if you just want to like make phone calls a couple hours a week, you know, when we have new volunteers coming in, our volunteer coordinator is super busy, and she can use some help just following up with people, saying, thanks for volunteering. What are you really interested in? We're so happy you're here. Also following up on fundraising emails, which you guys are going to help with, right? And anything else that we're doing. So there's a lot to do. WashingtonDems.org/volunteer. Also, what Dirk Wave, and where's John Erdevig? I think he's still outside. It's still time to get your name on the August ballot as a precinct delegate. If you don't know what a precinct delegate is, that's okay, because a lot of we kind of changed the rules, so it's weird. But Dirk is a notary public, and so is John Erdevig out there. And not only are they notary publics, they have brought affidavits, and they will distribute them. I mean, you sign them, get them all done here, and then they will take them into the clerk's office in time before the deadline. So Monday, or what's it, Dirk? Is it Tuesday? Tuesday at 4. So Dirk, wave again. Everybody look in the back. It's Dirk and John Erdevig in the back. In the back. Okay. Washington Community College Dem leaders, wave your hands. Wave your hands. Eli, where's everybody else? Oh, there we go. There we go. Okay, great. I just want to say that these guys built a model Democratic, a model college club. They have done so much work. They have brought in thank you. Thank you. We're recognizing them now, especially because they're graduating. And I'm trusting them to bring up the next generation. Yes, again, congratulations. They have just been a model, and we really appreciate and love them for all of the work that they've done. I'll tell you, when I was their age, I didn't have a clue. I do not know how they got so smart so fast. But anyway, they're going to go far. And Debbie Dingell, our Congresswoman, as you all know, has some certificates from a few of our other representatives for you guys, because you just did great. So thank you for that. That's our hope. Now for something that we can't not acknowledge, and that's the death of the Voting Rights Act this week. 3 or 4 years ago, this same 6 unelected people took away women's reproductive freedom nationwide. This week, they took away the opportunity for Black and brown people to vote in the old Confederacy, but not just in the old Confederacy, everywhere across the country. They've made it harder. That 6 people could undo generations of work that cost blood, sweat, and tears, deaths, for the Voting Rights Act is an absolute outrage. This outrage highlights one of the reasons we're here today, and also highlights why we need to hear from Sam Bagenstos after the three candidates for Senate speak. Please stay, because I'm sure, like all of you, for quite some time now, have been thinking, how the heck do we get out of this? How do we rebuild the country that we love and have worked for so long, so hard? How do we do that? Well, our neighbor and friend, Sam Bagenstos, who's a professor of law at the University of Michigan and was the general counsel under Biden for the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Office of Management and Budget, is working with a lot of other people nationwide who are equally gifted and experienced in government and strategy. It's called Project 2029, and Sam is going to brief us on Project 2029 after the candidates speak. I am so thankful for his work and their work. Sam was sitting right back here, but he's here somewhere. You trust me, you want to stay for this because you'll feel hope. People are on it. All right. Everybody's here largely, not only because of Sam, but also because we have all three candidates for our U.S. Senate seat. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mallory. Thank you, Abdul. I know Haley's on her way. She should be here anytime. We are so thankful for you to spend time with us. We really appreciate it. As you know, this is a very blue county. Something about precinct organizing, by the way. Something like 50,000, it's always a rough estimate, but about 50,000 blue-leaning voters just in Washtenaw, did not vote in the last cycle. Can you believe that? Oh my God. Okay, so 50,000 people didn't vote. And what we're wanting to do with all of this organizing is not only to reclaim those 50,000 votes, get them off the couch, get them to the polls, but also we know there are a fair number of Republicans who are pretty unhappy with the way things are going, mainly the price of eggs, but whatever, we'll take them. If it's just the price of eggs, come on over, that's okay, we'll start there. So some of us haven't decided who we're supporting in this race. Some of us in this room and not in this room are very, very passionate about one or another candidate. That's great. We need the passion. The passion is really important. We want everybody to understand that we are on the same team. Thank you. Once this primary is over, no matter who wins the primary, we must come together as a party to keep this Senate seat blue. We have to support whoever the candidate is. We just simply have to do that. We have a chance. It's an unusual chance because, you know, the structure of the Constitution, two Senate seats per state and all that. It's really, really increasingly hard for Democrats to control the Senate, as you know. But this year, this administration is so corrupt, so anti-democratic, so grifting, so everything bad, that we might actually be able to get the whole Senate. We might be able to get a majority in the Senate. But we can't get a majority in the Senate without this seat. We have to win this seat. So we believe in free speech for all. For all. We will not tolerate disruptions in this meeting. No disruptions. Everybody gets a chance to speak freely, their platforms, their persuasion, their minds. All right? So Sydney Koch, who is the moderator for the Senate session, will lay down the rules even more firmly. But I just want to be clear that we are respecting everybody's right to free speech. Everybody gets the same amount of time to speak. Anybody who's interrupted will get that time recovered. All right. And that will come out of somebody else's time. So, all right. Sorry to end on a warning note, but thanks, Barb. All right. I don't see our Congresswoman. Oh, good. Well, get her in here. Here comes Debbie, the hardest working Congresswoman. Woo! Come on up. You're so right. Here you go. Thank you, Debbie.
Well, good morning, everybody. It's good to see so many people here. So just remember, we got to stay here and not stop working from now until November. I'm just gonna do a quick Washington summary. I mean, it is a shit show. It's my favorite word. Just this week, I mean, we did three very important things just this week, and the speaker. So we did FISA, which is the Foreign Intelligence Services. It came into being after 9/11 so that we could keep us safe, and we do care about our national security. But we also cannot have people listening in on private citizens without warrants, period. It must have checks. So I was a no yesterday. I will continue to insist upon warrants. I will say to you that the leadership and Jamie Raskin voted yes for the 45-day extension. And I'm afraid that Republicans are just going to keep extending this and doing what they're doing now without warrants. And so we all need to pay attention to how we want to protect national security, talk about it that way, but we also have to make sure that we are protecting our Constitution and people's individual civil rights. So that's one. Two, we finally passed a Homeland Security bill that did not include additional funding for ICE or Custom and Border Patrol. Now, again, we should have done it a month ago. Some of you saw me when I got back after, and some people got the result of my screaming at them because they just happened to be male, and I was so mad at the white male in the White House that I'm tired of men trying to. But it is the bill that passed yesterday, and this is actually how it happened. And that the Freedom Caucus was not going to vote for anything that didn't have more ICE funding. And we sure as shit weren't going to vote for anything that did. So they brought it up on the floor. That one of the I'm sorry, my language is so bad. I've been with Republicans all week. They brought it up and the Freedom Caucus objected, but then there was a brief discussion, and it was a voice vote, and they did not ask for a roll call vote because it went on suspension, and they probably would not have been a roll call vote. So I will say the Republicans should have done this, 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago. You know how concerned I have been about our TSA workers, and I am going to work very hard to make sure our TSA workers are never a ping pong ball again in these kind of budget discussions. But there also is a very good article of what's happened to the Coast Guard, which they were getting paid, but many other things didn't happen, and that impacts us in our Great Lakes region as well. And FEMA's impacted, but DOJ already gutted FEMA, and people don't understand what we are doing to our emergency response. And then we had the Farm Bill. Our farmers need help. Our farmers need relief. They do. And our farmers in this area are struggling. But the Farm Bill that was put on the House floor yesterday it gives first of all, it cements the cuts in the big shitty bill on SNAP cuts. We cannot let that happen. We cannot let our children go hungry. We have got to, one of the first things we have to do when we get the House back in November, which we are going to do, is to restore those cuts. but it also did nothing to help our farmers who are really struggling. Gas today, by the way, do you know the average gas price gasoline in Washtenaw? $5. $5. Our farmers are dealing with increased fuel costs, fertilizer costs have gone up, and it does nothing to help them stabilize costs. And it also attacks public lands, endangered species. I voted no. And and we got to keep trying. It passed the House, but it's not. This isn't a real bill. The Senate will never vote for it. It's going to be a very long year. We're going to have. We're still fighting for guardrails on ice, and it's the Senate is playing games with reconciliation. The president. Okay, here. I mean, there's so much, and we need to hear from the candidates, and we need to really remember that we're going to be respectful and united when it comes to fall, and I'm going to ask that of everybody. But yesterday, Hegseth, who is a joke, so is Kennedy, and I got into it. I'm like, we have a measles outbreak in my county. Is he's trying to deny that was but Hegseth yesterday, and then the president followed up in the Oval Office that we're not really at war because we have a ceasefire. Yesterday was the 60th day of this president firing missiles, being at war in the Mideast. We will have another War Powers Act vote when we come back. And my goal in the next 10 days is, and so you all can help, is to put pressure on people like Tom Barrett, who say they're opposed to the war in Iran. Well, let's see them walk their talk and vote for a War Powers Act that doesn't give the president the authority to continue this war. I could talk about many other things, but I think they really don't want to hear from me. I think you want for. Well, people want to ask me questions. Okay, do questions because I really don't want to. I'm trying to be fast. They want to hear from they hear from me all the time, but I'm fighting for you. That's easy.
We know Debbie's always fighting for us. She's so incredible. She always takes the votes we want her to take. Thank God for that, right? Another round for Debbie. All right, I want to mention a few more things that we want to pay attention to. I want to mention mivoter.org. Please look at mivoter.org. We are looking at contests all across the state of Michigan. There's a lot to do besides right here in Washtenaw County. We've got to take back Kathy Schmaltz's seat. I always get the numbers wrong, right? We have a really good Jan Mano, a really good candidate over there. What's the number of that? 30. What is it? It's not 40. Is it 48? Anyway, over there, what is it, Jason? You think it's 46? Okay. Yeah, Jackson and Chelsea. We have a great new candidate over there, Jan Mano, to take out Kathy Schmaltz, who is a Republican, and she's like a really nice person until she takes a vote, at which time she becomes really cruel. So we want to take that seat back. We lost Reggie Miller as a candidate down in Monroe and Monroe down there. And we have another really great new candidate down there named Shannon Dare Wayne. Thank you very much. We need to support her. And there are candidates across the state that we want to be sure to support because we need to take back the Michigan House as well. We must take back the Michigan House. We have assets to do that. We start with mivoter.org. It is your personal voting guide. And we have all kinds of information in there now that's just evergreen about how, when, and where to vote and what the ballot initiatives are and so forth. And after the endorsements, your entire ballot with endorsed Democratic candidates will be right there in the palm of your hand with mivoter.org. So again, WashingtonDems.org/volunteer to help with all of these things. Ginger has, no, don't come in. HD 35. HD 35. What do you want people to do? Call people. All right, thanks, Ginger. Thank you. HD 35, Shedrick Green is a candidate, is the Democratic candidate that we're supporting up there. Okay, so oh, I know. Exits. There's an exit over there. There's the exit you came in, and there's an exit over there. I don't expect any trouble. We never have any trouble, but just in case, I'm supposed to tell you where all of the exits are. Okay. All right. I'm happy to introduce Sydney Koch, who is the moderator for our Senate session.
Thank you, Teresa. Good morning, everyone. We are absolutely thrilled to have all three Senate candidates here this morning. To that end, I don't want to take up too much of their time. They will each have 11 uninterrupted minutes to share who they are, what their policies are, and what they stand for with all of you. Rayanne up here will be our timekeeper. As Teresa mentioned, we are very much so hoping to have some good, robust, and respectful discourse. If I do need to stop the clock to allow a disruption to pass and make sure that everyone can behave respectfully, we will stop the clock to ensure that they get their full 11 minutes. Once those 11 minutes are up, we will have an opportunity for questions. We are running a little bit ahead of schedule, so we'll have 10 to 12-ish minutes for questions for each candidate. If you do have questions, there are note cards both here at the front, where you came in, and at the snack table. Please write your questions with the candidate name it is directed towards, as well as the topic, if you could. That will help us with filtering to get a good range of questions for everyone. And at this point, please deliver those questions to Lyndon. Lyndon, can you wave to everybody? Pass them forward, walk them up, whatever you need to do. And Lyndon will be sorting questions to try to make sure that we can cover a lot of topics and make the most of our time with our wonderful candidates. Without any more talk from me, is Ms. Stevens here? She's not here yet. All right. Senator McMorrow, are you willing to come up? So nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. Thank you for doing this. Good morning, Washtenaw Democrats. How we doing? First of all, I want to thank our beautiful, amazing chair for pointing out the fire exits and for running an incredible meeting. Gave a round of applause to Teresa. Sydney Koch for moderating. We have a number of endorsers in the room who I just am so grateful to have you on the team and want to recognize Annie Somerville, Lonnie Scott, Travis Redina, Erica Briggs, Margie Teal, Aiden Sova, John Reiser, and so proud to welcome Senator Jeff Irwin to our team, my seatmate for the last 8 years in the state Senate. I have learned so much from Jeff, and I could talk about Jeff for 10 minutes, but that's not what I'm supposed to do here. I'm Mallory McMorrow, and I am running to fight alongside you every single day as your next United States Senator. And I say that very intentionally because what I know is that no one can do this alone. I don't care what title you have. But that together, when we organize, when we stay focused, when we rally, we can and we will change the world and save our country. I had Senator Chris Murphy in town with me this week. Senator Murphy has endorsed our campaign, and he and I got to talking about the moment that we are in, and I want to start with that. Because shortly before the 2024 election, there was a poll that was done in Michigan that said that up to 20% of our voters no longer feel like democracy is the best form of government. And some of them even went as far as to say that maybe a dictator is worth a try. I know. Isn't that stunning? But we have to ask ourselves why. We can't just moan. We can't just groan. We have to ask ourselves why would there be residents in our state who look at the longest running democracy in the world? We are the shining beacon on the hill. Why would they want to throw that away? And if we don't answer that question and actually build a democracy worth fighting for, it's not just the end of the Democrats. It's the end of democracy. Now, Senator Murphy shared something that I think is really beautiful because we are coming up on our nation's 250th birthday. And I know that for a lot of people in this room, that can feel really conflicting because we got this monster in the White House at a moment when it feels like our democracy might not make it. And he is doing everything to tear it down to the studs and just serve to benefit himself and his friends and his family at the expense of the rest of us. But what Chris Murphy shared, and I want us all to think about this, somehow, all of us in this room, all of us in this state, we're lucky enough to be born in this time and to be born in this country and to be called in this moment at the 250th anniversary of our country to determine whether or not we make it past this moment. We are going to have the opportunity to tell our kids and our grandkids, we were there, and here's what we did to save the country. Does that sound like something we can do? And we should. Now, we've got a Democratic primary in this race, and I want to echo Debbie Dingell and our chair. No matter what happens in August, the most important thing is to send Mike Rogers back to Florida once and for all. And let's not make any mistake about the importance of Michigan in this moment, because the Republican Senate Leadership Fund, that is their largest super PAC, announced that they will spend $45 million in Michigan trying to buy this seat for Mike Rogers. That is more than they are going to spend in Georgia, in Maine, in Iowa, in Alaska, and in New Hampshire. It is the most they've ever spent in Michigan, and it's the earliest they've ever spent in Michigan. And that's just that super PAC. The DeVosses are going to spend $15 million more. Are we going to let the DeVosses buy this seat? Hell no, we're not. It is true that there is a path for Democrats to take back control of the U.S. Senate, and that it runs through this state. The Republicans figured out if they can buy this seat, then they block any chance for Democrats to take back the U.S. Senate. But here's why I'm running right now. Because we have been here before, and we have done it before. When I first ran for office in 2018, I ran against a Republican incumbent. And I will tell you, when I told my local Democratic Party leaders what I wanted to do, one of them looked me dead in the eye and said, "Oh, honey, that's cute." Because my opponent had won his last election by 16 points. And there was this idea that we had no business running in that race. But we organized and we rallied and we knocked on thousands of doors, and we met in churches and backyard barbecues, and we met in kitchens. We met in breweries. You may have seen we've been doing a brewery tour. There's a theme throughout my time in office. And we swung that district 20 points in a single cycle, and we beat his ass. Then a few years later, thanks to all of you, how many people supported the Independent Citizens Redistricting Ballot Initiative? Thank you. Thanks to all of your hard work to lay the groundwork. We knew we had a fair fight on our hands for the first time in state history, but that wasn't going to do it alone. So we raised millions of dollars. Some of you saw a speech that I gave from the Michigan Senate floor. It wasn't just that that speech went viral. It's that we used it to raise millions of dollars. I supported a dozen other candidates running for state Senate, brought my volunteers all across the state, and we flipped the state Senate for the first time since 1984. So we were ready when this Supreme Court struck down Roe. What did we do? We organized, we rallied, we passed Prop 3 to codify abortion access in our state constitution. And we went further in the state. I helped repeal the 1931 abortion ban, expanded access to reproductive health care, not just to reproductive health care, but also to doulas and to midwives, so that you don't die, especially if you're a Black woman, when you give birth in this state. When Betsy DeVos came for our kids, what did we do? We passed record education funding. We fully funded special education. And just this week, we passed legislation to finally include a weighted funding formula to make sure every child in this state starts at the same starting line. We banned child marriage, which is a thing I wish I didn't have to say in the year of our Lord 2026, but we did. We passed the strongest clean energy legislation in the Midwest. We passed sweeping gun violence prevention, including my bill that created Michigan's first red flag law. Now, I could spend the rest of the day talking about all the things that we did, but here's why I'm running in this moment and why I need your support. We have the biggest fight in the country on our hands. And I am the only candidate in this race who beat a Republican incumbent to get into office. And like it or not, we got to treat Mike Rogers like he's the incumbent. He ran just last cycle. He's going to have tens of millions of dollars, and we need to know how to win tough fights. I am the only candidate in this race who helped flip control of an entire chamber for the first time in my lifetime. And as the majority whip, my job every single day is to help keep the Democratic Party together so we can deliver for people every single day. That's not easy. It's not easy. How many people in this room like fighting with other Democrats? We love it more than anything else. Jeff and I have been there. It's not always easy. I've seen Jeff go to bat every single day when our party doesn't go far enough, and I love that about him. I've learned that from him. We are going to be the state that takes our country back. Are you ready to do that? Are you ready to show the rest of the country what it looks like to fight like Michigan? Are you ready to show the rest of the country what it looks like to win like Michigan? Are you ready for Michigan to be the state that leads the charge on getting Donald Trump out of the White House in 2 years and taking our country back? Thank you so much, Washington. And to babe. Oh my God. Yusuf, you walk in with a baby right when I'm wrapping up. Hi, buddy. Oh my gosh. Okay, I'm going to close with that. That wasn't planning. My daughter just turned 5. She starts kindergarten in the fall. I see her in the window every single day when I pull out of the driveway with her hand pressed there and she waves, "Bye, Mom." And that's why I'm doing this. For her and for all of our kids. Because they deserve to know that they're going to have a democracy and a future where they have more rights than we had and not less. We know how to do it. Let's go do it again. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Senator McMorrow. Rayanne, could you please add an additional 2 minutes for questions? Thank you. Senator McMorrow, you advocate for a public option over Medicare for all. At a time when healthcare costs are out of control, why is a public option more effective at bringing down costs, in your opinion?
Thank you so much. It's a great question because what I know is that people are hurting and they are struggling right now and they cannot afford to wait. We were so close when the Affordable Care Act passed in implementing a public option. And in the few states that have passed a public option, 3 states that have done it so far, they have not only closed the gap on uninsured, they've also driven down the costs of private health insurance. So if we want to get this done right now, the best way to do that is to allow anybody who wants to, regardless of your age, to opt into Medicare. Medicare for anybody who wants it. And if for whatever reason you like the health insurance plan that you have, you should have the freedom to keep it. That is how we fix it now. That's how we fix it immediately. We have to have the votes to get it done, and that's why I support it in the U.S. Senate.
Thank you. The U.S. Supreme Court has been trampling our civil rights, among other things, striking down the ban on conversion therapy you helped pass. What is your plan for reforming the Supreme Court? Sorry, tough one.
My God. I'm also a Notre Dame grad. And can I tell you, when I watch Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court, my heart breaks. Every option needs to be on the table to reform the Supreme Court. Number one, the U.S. Senate has the power of advice and consent. And I will not vote to confirm any attorney general candidate who is not going to commit to overseeing the Supreme Court and holding them accountable when they go rogue. We also need real oversight of the Supreme Court. We need ethics reform. We need to include potentially expanding the Supreme Court. We need age limits on the Supreme Court, just like we have in the state of Michigan. So that, I don't know if people know this, in the state of Michigan, in the Supreme Court, if you turn 70 within the next term, you cannot run for re-election. That has led to really healthy turnover in our Supreme Court in the state. Not only should we do that in the federal Supreme Court, we should do that for Congress too.
Going to pivot on you again. What kind of regulations do you think are necessary to make sure there are adequate safety measures for artificial intelligence?
Artificial intelligence is going to touch every single aspect of our lives. It already is, whether we know it or not. And for too long in the federal government, we've seen one of two camps. There are either people who stick their head in the sand and pretend like technology isn't happening. Did anybody watch the Facebook hearings a few years ago where we had federal officials trying to figure out how to use Facebook and just did not understand it? You know what I'm talking about. Or we have people like Donald Trump who invited all of the tech CEOs to the inauguration and say we can't stand in the way of innovation. What I know is that tech must serve people, not people serving tech. We need real sensible guardrails. And in the state Senate just this week, we passed a kids over clicks package of bills that would start to put some regulations on big tech related to addictive social media, eliminating addictive feeds, having privacy settings as the default for anybody under 18, holding AI chatbots accountable. If they do things like provide information related to self-harm, eating disorders, suicidal ideation, we just saw the state of Florida is actually suing OpenAI from a mass shooting. Tech companies must be held liable for the harm that their products cause. And as it relates to data centers, because this is the other aspect of AI, we should not welcome any data center at all that hurts our air or water, that doesn't use local union labor, that doesn't bring good revenue into our state, and that doesn't just do the basics to, again, serve people. It should not be done in the dark. There should be transparency. There should be an ability for you to know what's happening, and it should be illegal, as it already is in state law, a state law that I helped pass. It is illegal in state law today for ratepayers to subsidize the costs of these data centers.
Thank you. You just mentioned the environmental impact of AI. What other steps do you believe the American government should take to combat climate change?
One of the most devastating things the Trump administration has done is roll back all of the gains that we made on combating climate change. I am really proud of being a part of the caucus that passed the strongest clean energy legislation in the Midwest, setting Michigan on a path to full renewables by 2030. That has to be our North Star. We have a unique responsibility as the Great Lakes state and the home of the auto industry to do both. We cannot have tech at the expense of our environment. We need to restore the EPA to what its mission should be: the Environmental Protection Agency, not the Corporations Protection Agency. We need to bring funding back for weatherization for all of our homes. We need to bring funding back to remove lead service lines, and we need to hold tech companies accountable and pass on the federal level legislation that Senator Irwin helped offer that I've co-sponsored on polluter pay. If you pollute our environment, you should pay for it, not us. Michigan has been a model, and we need to continue the work that we've done on the state level, on the federal level.
Thank you. The trade deficit in the United States in 2025 was over $1.2 trillion. This represents both a loss of manufacturing jobs in the U.S. and accumulated debt on which Americans will have to pay interest, or in loss of control over the assets of the country. Do you consider the trade deficit to be a problem? And if so, what steps do you think the American government should take to reduce it?
I do consider this a problem. And now, who in this room remembers the last time we eliminated the deficit? Bill Clinton. We didn't do it by implementing DOGE, by having 22-year-old coders go in and slash and burn through all of these departments, firing people, and then going, whoops, we fired the wrong people, we should bring them back. We did it by thoughtfully going through every state department, every agency, having hearings, having oversight to understand, yes, we need to ensure government operates more efficiently, because it is true. I'm a millennial. I mentioned my daughter. I think about the debt that we are leaving to future generations. It has been Democrats historically who have solved the deficit, not Republicans. Every time Republicans are in power, the deficit grows. They give more tax cuts to billionaires. And they start trade wars with other countries that are devastating us here at home. So, implementing what the Clinton administration did, let's lay it all on the table. Let's go through transparently having hearings about how we make government function more efficiently, and let's reform our tax structure to pre-Reagan, because 50 years of trickle-down economics has killed us, to make sure that the wealthiest in this country pay their fair share for our schools and our roads and our health care. They've gotten away with it for far too long, and we got to get it back.
Thank you. What is your plan to save Social Security, which is expected to run out in 2032?
God, it's so devastating. So I graduated from college in 2008, and I went to school to be a car designer. So you can imagine that was quite possibly the worst time in American history to graduate from college. And I found myself with no job and no health insurance and nowhere to live. And I had thousands of dollars of student loan debt. And when I talked to my classmates, my counterparts, there's no expectation that we're even going to have Social Security. You wonder why a lot of people have simply given up. It's that we're all paying into a system that isn't going to be there for us. So I go back to my previous answer. We've got to reform our tax code to make sure that Social Security is fully funded. Not doing what the Republicans want to do, not doing what I bet Mike Rogers would advocate for if Donald Trump proposed it, which is to raise the age limit on Social Security. We've had some Republicans on the federal level advise that we should raise the age to 85. And their argument is that, well, seniors are working. So if they're working, they don't need Social Security. They're working at 85 because they have to. That is unacceptable. We need to make sure, again, if you have succeeded in this country, if the education system of this country and the capitalist system of this country allowed you to become successful, you should pay more into all of these systems so that all of us can retire at 65. I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial, especially as a Democrat who's running for U.S. Senate. I don't want to be in this job when I'm 90. I want to work my ass off as hard as I can and retire in my 60s. Hopefully by then I will be a grandma. My daughter will be able to afford to buy a house. And we should model what the American dream looks like, and retiring with dignity is a part of that.
Why do you believe that we, as Democrats, have a gap with rural voters? And how are you planning to increase Democratic appeal to those voters through your campaign?
It's a great question. Many people might not know this, but I grew up in a really rural small town. My first pets were chickens. My brother worked on our neighbor's farm. My best friend's mom growing up raced demolition derby. So I spent most Friday nights on a dirt track watching cars smash into each other. It was great. I loved it. And I try to think about every issue that I advocate for, just like I would talk to my friends and neighbors growing up. I was talking with Senator Heidi Heitkamp a few months ago, just kind of asking questions, and she said something that really sticks with me, that too often Democrats go into rural areas as missionaries instead of friends. If you show up and you're lecturing people about your 30-point policy plan and tell them what's best for their life, they're going to run away from you. You got to show up and listen. I've been up in the UP multiple times since the start of this campaign. I've been up in the UP multiple times since I've been in office. In 2019, in my first year in the state Senate, I did a district swap with a state representative from the Upper Peninsula. She came down to Southeast Michigan. I went up there. We spent a week. And I heard a lot of the same challenges. The last time I was in the UP, I talked to a farmer who's about 10 years into having his farm, small family farm. And what he was saying is that there are a lot of grant programs for new farmers, and there's a lot of subsidies for the big corporate guys. There's nothing in the middle. Now, listening and coming back to the table with a policy proposal that helps him, instead of coming in and lecturing him about what we're going to do, is how we're going to win rural voters back. But first, it starts by showing up, by listening, and by just being a normal person. They're trying to live their lives just like we are.
All right. And perfect timing with the
Amazing.
finishing that response. We are out of time, but so sincerely
Thank you.
appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Please sign up with us at McMorrowforMichigan.com. I appreciate you.
All right, excellent. I think I actually see her over on the far side there, which gives her a clear path. So, Congresswoman Stevens. Thank you so much for being here. You can go ahead, take it away.
Oh my goodness. Well, hello, Washtenaw County. It is so nice to see you all in a packed room on a beautiful, it is spring day. Oh, pick it up. Pick this one up. Okay, I got you, sir. And we got these great people on Zoom. Well, friends, my name's Haley Stevens, and I'm a daughter of Michigan. All right, and I'm running to be your next U.S. Senator. My path to public service has been really rooted in the values that I grew up with. Two really hardworking parents. All right. My dad had a couple of jobs. He was a public school teacher in Detroit. He taught first grade, and he also had a landscape business with my mom. So even on days kind of like what we had yesterday when it was maybe going to snow, the sound of the snow falling would wake my dad up, and he'd get out there to plow the lots and make sure other hardworking Michiganders could get to their jobs. And so it was that value of hard Michigan work that led me to putting up my hand for Michigan in the Obama administration, where I served as chief of staff on President Obama's U.S. Auto Rescue. You know, this was in the middle of the Great Recession, and it was a tough and trying and unbelievable time for all of us. And honestly, I was the person for Michigan on that team who told the operators to wire the calls from back home to my line, where people would break down, wondering if they were going to lose everything that they had ever worked for, if their small business was going to collapse. Now, we know that good federal policy making met the moment of who we are as Michiganders. As people saying, oh, who's going to shut out the lights in Detroit? Well, the lights today are fully on, and you know we're vibrant and doing as well as we can under this unbelievable administration. But I think what's interesting about what we've gone through and the expectations that we have bested is that today we find ourselves in another very profound moment of uncertainty. Although this time it's not a great recession, and that was caused by a multitude of corporate greed actions. This time it is a billionaire prancing around a stage with a chainsaw coming after our earned benefits. You know, I'm running for United States Senate after 4 terms in the U.S. House, after flipping a seat from red to blue, holding it in 2020 and living through that January 6th, which was an unbelievable time. But I'm running for U.S. Senate because a fully paralyzed veteran through a mutual friend asked me very simply if he was going to still get his benefit check. You know, we see costs, and we all know this reality, but costs continue to go up and up and up. You know, I've written legislation, day one legislation for the Senate, and I've written it now as a federal lawmaker. No tariffs on groceries, because Donald Trump's erratic tariffs not only are coming for our jobs, and we've lost 100,000 manufacturing jobs, but they are pinching our pockets at every turn. Our healthcare, our science is under attack. You know, I've spent 4 terms on the Science Committee. I played a lead role in getting the CHIPS and Science Act done. I've been a part of a great piece of legislation called the Scientific Integrity Act. And it's why I can't sit by when RFK Jr. is wreaking havoc on basic science at all of our expense. So I'm leading the effort in the Congress and alongside 10 Nobel laureates to impeach the guy, because I called on him to go. And, you know, people might say, well, Haley, you know, what's that going to do? You know, trust me, I've been in a lot of different dynamics in the Congress on behalf of Michigan, using my vote and my voice accordingly, acting even when it seems impossible. I know a lot of you in this room sharing that vision. You know, we also see just our basic rights, our democracy, our freedom, these rampant abuses of power. You know, day one, I stood by our Democratic leader saying we're going to not allow Elon Musk to access confidential taxpayer information, right? We are going to stand up for our democracy and our democratic systems. It's also why I had to write Stop Trump's Abuse of Power Act to close the loopholes in the Insurrection Act of 1807 to say that, hey, sir, just very politely, you can't deploy the military on American citizens when state and local law enforcement isn't acting for it. Look, friends, this time calls for courageous and bold leadership. And it also calls for effective leadership. You know, Mike Rogers, he's been endorsed by Donald Trump. He's, you know, showed us exactly who he is. You know, he wants to, you know, clink elbows, clink the martini glasses, bob along the Potomac, and not lift a finger for us. How we get out of this moment. And it's so very clear, it is a Michigan moment that calls for courageous leadership and effective leadership. Look, I've been recognized as the most effective Democrat in the Congress for Michigan because I write bills, I pass bills, and I help more people than you can imagine. And I can't sit by when, you know, you see the tight polls, you know, Rogers could get in, my good friend Alyssa Slotkin, you know, barely getting over the finish line. And it's an absolutely remarkable and incredible thing to do what we are all doing here today, which is engage in the discourse, in the deliberative process of our democracy. And so what I say to all of you is that I am eager to stand up for Michigan today, tomorrow, and to build a future that is made in Michigan by our best-in-class union, manufacturing, workforce, and I'm eager to stand alongside all of you in Washtenaw County. So thank you all so very much.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman. Rayanne, could you put about 4 minutes on the, thank you. Data centers not only impose environmental harm, they also create racial injustice when put in urban environments. What is your position and desired policy to safeguard lower income Black communities with regard to data centers in particular?
Well, I'm very proud to have played a role in passing the infrastructure bill. That was now 5 years ago. That very much addressed environmental racism and underserved communities. It was a very proud moment to be standing alongside Michael Regan, the former administrator, the last real administrator of the EPA that we had on Belle Isle, recognizing and celebrating the dollars for the first time. Because, right, friends, you're all taxpayers. The effective utilization of your taxpayer dollars going in at long last to the cleanup. Now, what we want to avoid, Sydney, with incoming investments and new technologies is we want to avoid any cleanup, right? We don't want any pollution to begin with. And so I very much believe and always have as a federal lawmaker that, one, we need to have a tax code that actually works for people. If investment is coming in, then we need to see the investment. It means your costs have got to go down, and that local communities, particularly underserved or overlooked communities, need to be heard. This is something I've spent a lot of time with State Representative Morgan Foreman discussing and collaborating on, as she's in the forefront of some of these new growth sectors. And also, we know in Michigan that we want to lead on the forefront of innovation. But right now, I'm on a couple of bills on this, but our tax code isn't working for these new technologies. It's a hyper concentration of wealth. It's the wealthier getting wealthier, It is, large scale companies that aren't forced to be publicly traded, by the way. So if you have a pension, your pension isn't benefiting from that. And so what I want to see is another infrastructure guarantee, a dedicated and secure pot of money that comes from the new big tech into addressing exactly what you just said. Having the money there. We don't have to wait for a cleanup. We can do it now. It's what some people like to call public-private partnerships.
Thank you, Congresswoman. What steps, in your opinion, can the federal government take to make housing more affordable?
Well, I can tell you exactly what I'm doing right now to make housing more affordable. I believe that housing is infrastructure. I am thrilled to see that the brand new incredible mayor of Detroit, Mary Sheffield, in her State of the City said, hey, we're going to build 1,000 new homes in Detroit within the next 4 years. A constituent a handful of years ago in my congressional district had come up to me and said, we have a huge problem with mold. Fix Moldy Housing Act is something that I picked up, that I saw that John Conyers wrote that bill and that it had been buried after he left his time in Congress, because we've also got to modernize and address some of the downturn in our current housing stock. Look, you all live in Washtenaw County. Okay, you don't need me to tell you about the pain points around affordable housing. The other bill that I have drafted that I'm really excited about, because I'm seeing, the bipartisan attention on it, which is pre-tax savings accounts that go into home ownership. But we also have to allow people to stay in their homes, right? One of the things when we got the COVID rescue dollars into our communities, I was so proud to work with Pontiac, Michigan on revitalization dollars. So what they said is, hey, if you're a resident and you need to fix up your home, you can apply through the city for up to $30,000 to fix up your home. Because particularly for older Americans, that's a reality as well. And let me not leave out a landmark piece of legislation that I have drafted, that I'm leading on, that has bipartisan support, which is for the disabled. Because too often in our society, we say, oh, well, I'm just lucky. I'm lucky. I can afford to fix up my home. I have a dependent who has, a complex medical condition and doesn't have the full abilities of a non-disabled person. So they got to build a ramp, and then they got to fix up the shower. And then you ask, well, where's that tax code working for that family? It's not. And so I've written legislation to allow for tax credits for home renovations for folks with complex medical conditions, not just our children, but our veterans and our aging population as well, who deserves to age with dignity. So thank you.
Thank you, Congresswoman. You spoke about the disabled. There are multiple vulnerable groups within our population, including transgender youth. How will you help to protect transgender folks, disabled folks, other folks that have different vulnerabilities? And do you view that as a legislative role or something to focus on the courts?
Well, look, the Supreme Court is in need of dire ethics and reform. All right. So I don't really like leaving a lot to the courts, and I believe in the co-equal branches of government. And even though the people who I serve with are completely complicit in Donald Trump's unbelievable usurpation of power at all of our expenses, what I believe is this: leave people alone. Let kids be kids. Look, not to make it about myself, obviously, but I had a lot of energy as a kid. Sometimes I was misunderstood. Sometimes I was the different person in the classroom, right? We've got to leave children and their families alone. We've got to support our educators, our guidance counselors, this whole hubbubaloo on sports. Everyone wants kids to be safe. We got to make sure that there is safety, in our, within sports and with the associations and the families. And, we've just got to stop picking on children and families. Look, I could go on about some, my record, which I'd love to share with all of you, but I've been proud to stand up for those who I believe are being abused and mistreated in society right now. It is the stuff on passports and driver's license. Give me a break, and look, we've got this right-wing Christian nationalism going on, and that's all rooted in this. Leave children alone, leave trans people alone, and build an equitable society. And friends, you can look at my voting record, okay? Because there was a vote that came down, and it was supposed to all be bipartisan, and at the end, they put in this poison pill about gender care. And, it's ridiculous. And so, 435, your great Congresswoman Debbie Dingell, by the way, who, we're there every day, pushing out these policies. I didn't give away my vote to this, what I believe is hatred and targeting and abuse of a minority population. So that's just how I feel about that.
What will you do to repair the damage to the Department of Education, specifically funding for special education services, which is a federal responsibility?
Okay. So I've sat on the Education and Labor Committee for all 8 years I've been in the Congress. I've stared down Betsy DeVos. I have watched her come and testify about student loans and not say the word student once. Linda McMahon, somewhat makes her way over. But if it is USAID, which is the different branch of government, but the humanitarian branch of government that they shut down, if it's the Department of Education, which they have all but shut down, an Office of Civil Rights, while we have congressional hearings on protecting students on college campuses, this is an outrage. And not only do we need to reopen the Department of Education, we need to do so with an Office of Literacy at the forefront that is partnering with all communities and all zip codes. I feel this one in my very bones. I'm one of the loudest people on this, and you better believe I'll use the perch in the United States Senate to work on this and to push to get this done, which is the full funding for special education. Because for over 50 years, my educators in the room know all about this, because for over 50 years, we have had this unfunded mandate, and we have seen and witnessed our schools going unfunded as a result, and they're robbing Peter to pay Paul. This is why programs like industrial, manufacturing, STEM, all of that. I fought for STEM education, by the way. Oh my gosh, Trump, canceled the bill that he actually signed of mine on STEM equity, but that's a whole other point. But these are the things that we should be doing and talking about. These are unfunded mandates that are hurting us. We have to fully fund special education. We have to fully fund STEM education equity programs. We have to support educators, which is why, I'm in, regular consultation. It's not that it's a campaign season, but working alongside the educators in my district as a federal lawmaker to take their needs to the chamber and make sure that they are heard. And it is why I will not back down when these backwards people who don't believe in public education are coming for the dollars that fund our schools.
Rayanne, how are we doing on time? Okay. Excellent. Congresswoman, what do you believe qualifies you above your competitors to speak to foreign policy?
Well, well, I'll say this. Look, I have a record in the Congress. I have a record as a federal policymaker. I have a record as someone who has voted on immigration and, of course, our tax code. You also asked about our deficit, which it is absolutely outrageous that we have $1 trillion in just deficit interest payments that we are making annually. And by the way, friends, I'm not going to stand for saying that you as taxpayers will cover our debt. But in terms of foreign policy, look, I have a firsthand experience with someone you all might know, Paul Whelan, who was detained by the Russians. I was getting sworn into Congress, Michigan's first millennial to the Congress when millennials were still cool. And I'm getting ready to get over there, and I get the phone call, well, I hope you're enjoying civilian life because your constituent was just taken by the Russians. 5.5 years in a Russian labor camp, a kangaroo court trial, I mean, look, I'm battling Putin from day one, all right? We got Whelan home. We created a hostage task force. Yeah, can we hear it for Paul Whelan from Manchester, Michigan? I mean, watching that bright light of a plane, I mean, every year leading a bipartisan resolution in the Congress to condemn Russia, call for the release of the hostages. You know, I was doing this before the Ukraine war started. So, you know, these are firsthand experiences. And I also know that whether you have a foreign policy event in your life or not, it impacts you. And I really believe that we have to stop Trump's illegal wars. We have to get these war power resolutions passed. We will do that when we flip the Senate, and you can trust me that I will vote accordingly to how I have in the Congress. Thank you, Washtenaw Dems, and thank you, Chair, by the way, Teresa. Thank you, and thank you, Sydney.
Thank you so much, Congresswoman.
Yeah, it's good to see you all. Again, I'm Haley Stevens. I'd be honored to earn your vote and have your involvement in my race. Okay.
Thank you so much. All right. And finally, we have Dr. El-Sayed. Thank you for being here.
All right, good morning. Good morning, Washtenaw Dems. So I just want to say a quick thank you to the chair, to the moderator, to all of you for coming out today. Vigorous conversation about where we go with our democracy. I want to thank the other two folks running for this seat for their leadership and their thoughtful engagement with the questions. My name is Abdul El-Sayed, and I am running to get money out of money in your Medicare for, because y'all, it just shouldn't be this hard. Shouldn't be this hard in the richest, most powerful country in the world to afford a second bag of groceries. Shouldn't be this hard to know that your kid goes to a dignified school. Should not be this hard to go to a doctor or see a dentist. Shouldn't be this hard to pay your taxes and know that that money is being spent on you and your kids and your grandkids rather than being sent abroad to buy bombs and tanks that will be dropped on other people and their kids and their grandkids. Shouldn't be this hard. Now, I was never supposed to run for office. That was not part of my life's plan. I got an 11-letter first name that's got sounds that come out of parts of people's throats they don't know they have. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a doctor because I could go 15 hours to my family's native Egypt or 15 minutes into the city of Detroit, and either way, I would cross a 10-year life expectancy gap. And I understood that it shouldn't matter where you are in the world, shouldn't matter what your parents do, shouldn't matter what you do, that you deserve a long, healthy life, especially in the richest, most powerful country in the history of the world. I became a doctor to do something about that. And in my last year of medical school, I'm finally doing the work that doctors do, which is about asking and answering two questions. What's wrong and how can I help? Now, you spend a lot of time learning a lot of physiology to answer those questions, only to realize that the biggest issue is actually about the pathologies in our politics. The air you breathe, the water you drink, whether you can walk in your community without being the victim of somebody's violence, whether that's a neighbor or the state itself, whether or not you can even see a doctor when you get sick. And I realized I wanted to do something about that. And so when all of us graduated medical school and all my classmates went off into specialties, I went into public health. Got the opportunity to rebuild Detroit's health department after it had been shut down when the city was facing bankruptcy and state takeover. Led Wayne County's Department of Health, Human and Veterans Services, leading a 550-person agency, $172 million budget. And across our work, we did innovative things. We realized that our kids were going without the glasses that they need to be able to see the board in the classroom. So we built a program to guarantee every child a free pair delivered at school within 2 weeks of a vision test. The program's done 50,000 pairs of free glasses across the state of Michigan since then. Took on some of the biggest corporate polluters in our state, forced Marathon Petroleum down. If you were to go to Ohio, which I do not recommend, but if you were, you'd cross the southwest tip of Detroit, you'd see this skeleton city with all this pollution, smells kind of bad in the car. That's Marathon Petroleum, biggest polluter and the most polluted zip code in the whole state. They wanted to raise their emissions. We forced them to invest $10 million of their own money to reduce their emissions when they had wanted to increase them. After the Flint water crisis, we had all of our schools, daycares, and Head Starts tested for lead in the water. The first 68 schools we tested, 19 tested positive for lead. Helped to rewrite the state's lead policy after the Flint water crisis. We put Narcan for free in 100 locations and vending machines across Wayne County. We put air quality monitors all over our county so folks could get real-time information about the air they breathe. And when we found out that our county ranked number 8 for medical debt nationwide, we realized we could eliminate it for pennies on the dollar. So that's what we did. We set aside $7 million to erase $700 million of medical debt, biggest medical debt erasure in Michigan state history. Now, I'm never going to forget that day, sitting in my office. Feels like 10 years ago, it was about a year ago, when the guy living in the big white house that's about to get an upgrade or downgrade decided to freeze federal funds. Y'all remember that? And I'm sitting in my office looking at all the line items they've just frozen. WIC, food on the table for moms and babies, vaccines, federally qualified health centers, all frozen. And I get a notification on my phone that after his long and storied career, our U.S. Senator Gary Peters is not seeking re-election. And I'd ask myself, where is the fight for the public's health now? Now, I'm going to give you a crazy statistic. If I were to be elected, I would be the first Democratic doctor elected to the U.S. Senate since 1969. First ever public health official elected to the U.S. Senate. Now, if you've ever felt some kind of way about RFK Jr., I think we probably could use one of those right about now, no? Now, y'all know this is not my first rodeo. I ran for governor back in 2018, all right? I was 32 years old, didn't know what I was doing. I said, you know what, I'm going to go big or go home. I went big, then went home. But in the process, we earned 340,000 votes. I was 2-to-1 more efficient than our governor, 3-to-1 more efficient than a current congressman. We got outspent 7-to-1. But I said something at the time folks weren't ready to hear yet. And that's this. Donald Trump is not himself the disease of our politics. He's just the worst symptom of the disease of our politics. The disease is the system that allows corporations, billionaires, special interests to buy and sell politicians in ways that leave them rigging the system against us. We pay more for what we got to buy, get paid less for what we do, and watch our tax dollars get misappropriated from behind our backs to be used for things that we don't need when our own kids go without the things they absolutely need. So we're running a campaign. Do 3 things. We want to get money out of, put money in your, pass Medicare for. Let me talk a little bit about what that means. That means I'm the only one who's never taken a corporate PAC check to run or win a campaign. The only one, Democrat or Republican. So when I tell you that I do not think corporations should be able to buy politicians, I'm telling you I do not think they should be able to buy politicians. I intend to make it illegal. It means standing with unions who built the middle class, who built the 40-hour work week, who are the reason why our kids go to school instead of going to work. We got to stand with them and finally pass the PRO Act. It means taxing billionaires their wealth. Because guess what? You tax a billionaire 8%. You know what they still are? Still a billionaire. Your kids' are going to be rich. Maybe you could pay your fair share so that all of our kids could go to good schools. It means making sure that rather than sending our money abroad in blank checks to foreign militaries to back apartheid and genocide, that money stays here to build schools for our kids and provide health care for our people. And in the richest, most powerful country in the world, I do not think medical debt should be in existence. I'm proud of the work we did in Wayne County, but it's crazy that you got to eliminate medical debt. I don't think it should exist. And you know the best single way to fix that? To finally do the work of passing Medicare for all in this country. Now look, I know I'm not supposed to run for office. I got the wrong name. I pray the wrong way, right? Color of my skin's off. My family comes from the wrong place. I get it. I understand. But I also know this. I'm not going to stand here and tell you what you cannot have and should not fight for. Because for me, I got 2 little girls at home, 8 and 3, ethnically half Egyptian like me, ethnically half Indian like their mom, where they get their looks, thank God. 100% American, though. And those little girls are growing up in America where they have fewer rights than their immigrant grandparents had when they came here. Grandparents who took a bet on a set of ideals. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, should say people, are created equal. Government of the people, by the people, and for the people. And y'all, we never quite got there, but we've never moved backwards as fast. This is not about holding a seat if we're going to do the same things with that seat that anyone else would do. This is about using that seat to advance a world where we can look at our kids and our grandkids in the eye and tell them that we did what we could with what we had in a moment, that we advanced the ball down the field, that we fought for our democracy, that we fought for them to be able to get health care, to know that they could join a union, to know that they had prosperity in front of them. That's what this is about. That is what this seat should be about. And I hope that if you believe in that with me, that I can earn your support in this race. Again, my name is Abdul El-Sayed. I am running for U.S. Senate.
Thank you, Dr. El-Sayed.
Thank you.
All right. Rayanne will add about 2 minutes to the clock for questions.
I got 2 months back.
Got 2 minutes back, yeah.
It's amazing.
Medicare for all means eliminating all private health care insurance. Would you compromise and support universal health care that offers both private and public options?
So I happen to know some things about Medicare for all. I wrote a book on the subject. And what Medicare for all is that you would have a guaranteed Medicare card that is delivered to you the moment you are born. Where's Lunas? He'd have his, and his dad Yusuf would have his, and your mom Yusuf would have hers. And it would be there right for you in a back pocket. No premiums, no copays, no deductibles, no in-network, no out-of-network, just healthcare when you need it. That's what Medicare for all is. Now, opponents of Medicare for all want to tell you what it's going to take away. There is no reason that there can't be another card right there next to this card. I don't know why people would get one, but there's no reason why you would have to take anything away. It is a misnomer that has been pushed by the industry to tell us what we will lose rather than to focus on what we will gain. What Medicare for all is guaranteed health care from cradle to grave without having to worry about losing your health care. If you turn 26, if you get a job, if you lose a job, if you get married, get divorced, turn 65, all these things that can take away your health care now. It is just there for you. Now, I've been up and down the state. And even when I ran for governor on a Medicare for all program in Michigan, I understood that union members worry about the fact that they've bargained hard for the health care that they want. And they say, look, Abdul, I just don't want to lose anything. I'm like, okay, I'm not here to take anything away. I'm here to give something. And if you decide that what we give you is good, then maybe instead of having to bargain with the third-party CEO of a health insurance company making $18 million a year, sitting right there at the table, taking what you just bargained for in premiums, maybe you can deliver that money back to yourself in wages and in benefits. So I am a doctor. I am not here to take away anybody's health care. I am here to guarantee you the health care that you need and deserve in this country without having to worry about whether or not you're going to fall into medical debt. And I just want to make sure that folks understand the difference between that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. El-Sayed. What can the federal government do to promote the creation of manufacturing jobs in the United States, and in particular here in Michigan?
Thank you for the question. Now, my dad came to this country because he wanted to make cars. Okay, he was the brightest student out of his school in Egypt, and he was thinking, it was 1978, where can I go? It was between Detroit, Michigan, and Bayreuth, Germany. And the only similarity between those two places is that they both end with the sound Reut, and they both make cars. And my dad looked at himself and he's like, well, Bayreuth seems pretty close to Nazism, so I'm not going there. And at least in America, I can be just as American as anyone else. He took a bet on coming here. And I remember when he came home in 1996, after a whole round of layoffs at the GM Tech Center, he said, a car company that doesn't invest in making cars is not long going to be a car company. And then I remember when 2008 rolled around and GM went through bankruptcy, he's like, do you remember what I told you? All of this was built out of federal policy in the form of NAFTA. And we got to be clear about what NAFTA was. NAFTA was a cancer on American manufacturing. And forgive me the medical analogy, but when you got cancer, maybe chemo is in order, okay? And to me, what chemo looks like is a very clear, targeted set of tariffs. Now, look, I know tariffs are a bad word because Donald Trump does tariffs, but let's just stay with me now, okay? Trump's tariffs are ham-fisted, self-serving, and chaotic. And just to continue with the analogy here, Trump's tariffs are like, imagine you had a patient with cancer, you're like, I'm going to give you all the chemo all at once. What happens to your patient? They die. So my vision of where tariffs could go is that you would be targeted and specific. You would invest in research and development in high growth potential manufacturing industries, and then you would create a very clear tariff schedule that you would communicate with all of your trading partners that would have very clear benchmarks around when it would fall, and then you would do all of this with unions at the table, bargaining right alongside the companies that you're talking about. And over time, as you incubated high growth industries with a lot of manufacturing, you would start to pull those tariffs back and allow all of our companies to compete freely on the global market. That to me is the vision. And we could do it, yes, in auto, of course, because this is the best single place to make cars in the world. We have the best engineers and we got for sure the best workers. But it's also high growth industries like renewable energy, where we're having our lunch eaten because we are pulling back rather than moving forward. And I think those jobs would come here. They'd be smart to come here because we got the best manufacturing talent, be it on the engineering side or on the manufacturing side in the whole world. And I'm looking forward to advancing that vision. But we all got to be serious. Just because Donald Trump touches the tool doesn't mean that we don't touch the tool. It means that we use the tool correctly, right? And that's where I think we need to go.
Thank you. Yesterday, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals entered a nationwide ban on the abortion pill. What would you do to ensure nationwide access to abortion pills by mail or to abortion broadly?
So I mean, the principle on which this decision was made is based on this really, really old law called the Comstock Act, which is about like, I can't believe I'm about to say this word here, but like it was about early on preventing people from mailing pornographic material to each other. And I mean, I think we're long past that now, right? So I think we need to repeal on the Comstock Act first and foremost. Second, we need to demand that science is what we use to make decisions. Mifepristone, misoprostol, these are medications that have a long history in use. They are extremely safe, and yes, they are effective. And by the way, they're not just safe and effective for abortion, they're used in other circumstances. So when you start criminalizing medication because you want to read your own religion into the public law, I call bullshit. I'm sorry. No. There is no reading of FDA policy. There is no reading of FDA policy or the medical literature that justifies any of this. So I think we need to abolish the Comstock Act, repeal it. I think we need to give the FDA and the scientific reasoning around the FDA more teeth. And I think we need specific policy that protects MIFI and MISO moving forward.
Given the Dems' losses in 2016 and 2024 and having a lowering approval rating, do you believe that a moderate Democrat or a more progressive Democrat like yourself has a better chance of beating Republicans in November?
I think I'm a physical manifestation of the answer, but I'll just say this. It's like the answer is I am here. I'll be honest with you all. I've been up and down the state, 90 different cities, 350 public events. When your name's Abdul, you go everywhere, talk to everybody, okay? And one of the things I've come to believe, I had this inkling before I ran, but I've come to believe it in my bones. There is no such thing as left and right. This is like a fake lens that we put on our politics. There is no middle voter who's sitting there being like, am I left or right on this issue? Most voters are like, can I afford my groceries? Is my job going to be there for me tomorrow? Can I go see a doctor when I need one? And they're looking for an answer that is about your integrity about answering the question. And here's the thing about it. When I ran the first time, right, I know I was asking people to take a bet on a 32-year-old never run for office. This time around, anybody who's watched this race, have I changed my message at all? In fact, I got yelled at by a woman at church. She was like, why do you keep saying the same stuff? I'm like, we got the same problems. Like, fix the problems. I'll say new stuff. Like, I'm not a comic. Like, I don't need new material. I just need to say the same because the problems still exist. So all of that is to say, look, I think we need real solutions to problems. And if you just look at voting record in Michigan, we went for Bernie Sanders in 2016, then Donald Trump in 2016, then Joe Biden in 2020, right? And then Donald Trump again in 2024. Either we're like, as a state, deeply schizophrenic, we've taken notes from our weather, or people just can't find what they're looking for. And I think in this state, people want pragmatic but honest solutions. And pragmatism isn't about making peace with what a corporation wants. Pragmatism is about understanding and mapping the public policy that we drive to the needs of everyday people. So when some corporation tells you you can't have Medicare for all because it would mean that their CEO doesn't make 18 million bucks, I don't give a damn. Pragmatism to me is you need healthcare, we need to guarantee you healthcare. So the premise of the question to me is not moderate, progressive, because I just don't know what those words actually mean. I think we need people who are willing to stand up to the system that has corrupted our politics. I think Michiganders are looking for that. And I'll just finish here. a lot of people want to make a whole lot about my name. I get it. I know. Okay. I've been Abdul my whole life. I had a guy come up to me at a healthcare town hall who had voted for Trump. And he says, I don't like you much. I was like, I'm sorry. He's like, but I'm going to vote for you. I'm like, what? I think you really want me to have healthcare. I was like, I really do. He's like, you know, I wanted to come for myself because like I either thought you were dumb as rocks or you really want healthcare because I know what a doctor can make and I don't know why you're running around the state trying to talk like you're talking because it doesn't make sense to me. And he said, you're not dumb. And I think you just really want me to have healthcare. I said, I really do. He's like, I know, and that's why I'm voting for you. And then I asked him, I was like, so why don't you like me? He's like, well, because you're Muslim. I was like, but here's the thing, you don't need people to like you. You need them to like them. And you need to have solutions that actually map to their lives. That's what wins in Michigan. That's what we need. And we got to stop playing games with the corporations who want to tell us what we should not fight for because that's what they're going to fund. I think enough is enough on that.
Thank you. Rayanne, did I see the red card? All right. Thank you. Time is up.
Thank you.
So thank you so much.
I want us to give ourselves a round of applause. What a great job. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for recognizing the free speech rights of everybody in the room. Really appreciate it. I'll say one more time, we have to keep this seat. We have got to keep this seat blue. Without a blue Senate, that guy in the White House, he will, can you see Eileen Cannon on the Supreme Court? Right? Lifetime appointments to every federal seat that comes open on the bench. We have got to keep this seat blue in order to win the Senate. So that's all I'm going to say more on that topic. I also want to say that one of the reasons, as you all know, that we're in this mess is because of Citizens United in 2010, which opened the floodgates for billionaires and corporations to corrupt our politics and buy the politicians they need. We have petitions out here to get Mop Up Michigan on the ballot. We can't flip Citizens United yet, but we can get Mop Up Michigan on the ballot. Hi, Erica. So if you haven't signed it, go out and sign it, and you'll be happy you did. We can get money, corporate money, out of at least Michigan politics. We want to do that. Okay, Sam, I don't see Sam anymore. Sam Bagenstos, where are you? There he is. Okay, great. Okay, if you want to have a conversation, I'm glad you want to have a conversation. Take it outside, please. Everybody? Everybody? Okay, as I said, you want to stay for this. Sam Bagenstos is working with colleagues nationwide on what do we do now when we take the presidency back and we have our first inauguration of a Democratic president in 5 years in 2029. What do we do? What do we do? Sam is working on that with colleagues nationwide, and I'm so thankful. This will give you some hope.
Thank you. Thanks so much. This is great. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good. Can we get the doors? Can we get the doors closed, please? Because you definitely want to hear this. So, thank you very much.
All right. Well, so a little bit anticlimactic after the Senate candidates. I will say a couple of things. First of all, what I'm going to talk about is incredibly important because it's about what will happen, God willing, when we have a new Democratic and pro-democracy small d president in 2029. And I appreciate Teresa using the word when to refer to that. I will also say, though, everything that I'm about to talk about depends on us winning the election this fall and us winning the election 2 years from now. None of this will matter otherwise. And I just want to highlight just how important it is. I'm going to talk a little bit about judicial reform in a minute. What Donald Trump is doing is packing the bench with people who will support his own personal interests and the interests that he and his family have in consolidating their corrupt control over the government. And, we saw what happened on January 6th. I was in D.C. I saw what happened on January 6th in 2021. It's going to be so much worse. And if they have the courts on their side, watch out. We need to retake the Senate. And retaking the Senate means holding this seat, holding Georgia, holding New Hampshire. And people say flipping 4 seats. There's a certain guy in Pennsylvania I'm a little bit worried about. So I'd say flipping 5 seats, but we have to hold this seat. So that's why I love all those people who just talked, and whoever it is, we're going to bust our ass to elect. And I just want to say that. But let me talk about what's going on as we prepare for what will hopefully be a new Democratic and pro-democracy administration in 2029. Everybody I talk to says, is there a Project 2029? Is there a Project 2029 going on? And I get it. It's incredibly pressing. What has Trump done? Trump has torn down so many of the important functions of government. I mean, so Department of Health and Human Services, where I used to work, my old office, the Office of General Counsel, half of the staff laid off, half of the regional offices, the places that enforce rules like protecting your family members in nursing homes, half of them just fired. You see people at CDC, at NIH, who are responsible for protecting us against emerging pandemics. People who I worked with to try to stop bird flu as it was moving across America, to try to stop Ebola, to try to stop Mpox, right? So many of them fired. You see the Department of Education, a third of staff have been laid off. Even this week, Secretary McMahon said that she is looking for ways, notwithstanding that Congress has tried to stop her from doing this, looking for ways to move all of the support of special education out of the Department of Education. And this is happening over and over and over across the government. So Trump has shut down significant parts of the government. He has subverted the parts of the government that he's kept going and even weaponized that against his opponents. And this is an incredibly important thing to reverse, because one of the things we learned in the Biden administration, we knew this, but we learned it in an incredibly harsh way, is that 4 years is an incredibly short time. It's a short time on government time, especially. We moved very quickly on many issues in the Biden administration. I was a day one appointee. I was general counsel of the Office of Management and Budget. I started at 12:01 p.m. on January 20th, 2021, immediately did a bunch of stuff. I was responsible for moving the executive orders. So we immediately pulled down the Muslim ban. We immediately reversed the border wall. We immediately reversed the bans on DEI, or what they called at the time critical race theory. We did a whole lot of stuff right away. But Donald Trump and Russ Vought this second time through have shown there is another gear, right? And we need to find yet another gear beyond that so that we can reverse all the damage they've done, but also build. And I say build and not just rebuild, because a lot of the stuff that existed before just wasn't working. If we just go back to the way it was before, that's not going to solve the problem. So everybody understands that in 2025, when Donald Trump took office with his henchman Russ Vought right next to him, Russ Vought, who had been in charge of Project 2025, they had a game plan, and they have executed this game plan to tremendous effect. They have put into effect more than half of the policy proposals in the Project 2025 plan. These are some of the biggest things that you are seeing that are negative coming out of this administration. So everybody wants to know, well, how, are we doing something like that? And I'll give you an answer that is maybe not the answer that's exactly what you're hoping for, but it is an answer that should make you comfortable that people are focusing on the right things right now. So is there a Project 2025? As a technical matter, yes, there is a Project 2025. as a real matter, there are a whole lot of people in overlapping organizations and groupings who are working together right now. Now, one of these organizations has actually acquired the intellectual property for the name Project 2029. But that's just one of them. There are a lot of people working on these issues. They're overlapping groups. I see Dan Rivkin is here, who works for my dean. So hopefully he won't tell my dean. I'm spending a lot of my outside time on this, and I find every day I'm on some call with some different group of people or working on some set of planning with different groups of people that overlap on these questions. There's no single overarching group. Now, that's fine. So some aspects of the 2029 plan, particularly the substantive policies, are going to depend a lot on what happens in the presidential nomination process, on who the presidential nominee is, on what platform they run on what issues they're going to prioritize. It's just inevitable. But there are some aspects of what we need to do that everybody will agree on, or nearly everybody within our broad Democratic Party or even broader pro-democracy, pro-rule of law coalition will agree on. And that is some of the most essential work right now. People are working on the substantive policies as well. That so-called Project 2029 group, the one that actually has the name, it's all about churning out substantive policies. But what most of the most important work is right now is actually on stuff that is about how government works. And so what do I mean by that? Well, some of it is institutional rebuilding. One of the areas that I spend a lot of time on, I started my career as a Department of Justice attorney enforcing the Voting Rights Act. Another reason why we need judicial reform right now, if you look at what the Supreme Court just did to the Voting Rights Act this week. One of the things I've been spending a lot of time working on is extensive planning for rebuilding the Department of Justice, for making sure the Department of Justice is actually serving important interests in promoting civil rights, promoting environmental protection, attacking threats to competition, and not being used as a weapon to go after the enemies of an administration, and building protections so that it can't be subverted again. After President Nixon, we had a moment of consensus in our political system that the Department of Justice should not be used to go after political enemies. And that was something that President Ford and President Carter and even President Reagan and the two Presidents Bush, the second President Bush, not as much. You remember the U.S. Attorney scandal, but eventually he was called back on that. That Democrats and Republicans agreed that the Department of Justice, it's just too great a power to put people who are opponents of your regime in prison, to go after people who are opponents of your regime with massive lawsuits because they're opponents of your regime. That has completely broken down. We now have prosecutorial decisions being made by the President of the United States, including the most ridiculous prosecutions that any lawyer who signs onto one of these indictments, I mean, I'm a pretty mild person. I will say any lawyer who signs onto the indictment, like the Jim Comey indictment, I don't even love Jim Comey, right? I mean, in my family, after 2016, we had a 3-word phrase about Jim Comey. I'm not going to say the first word among family, but you understand what I'm saying. I don't love Jim Comey. That prosecution against him is an incredible violation of the First Amendment. It goes well beyond any legitimate use of the prosecution. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. We are seeing that again and again across the country. Any lawyer who signed on to that needs to lose their law license. I mean, I have to say. So one of the things that folks are doing is figuring out, well, how do we rebuild the Department of Justice so that the Department of Justice can immediately go after actual civil rights violations in the world, actual violations of environmental laws in the world, actual violations of antitrust laws as well, also can immediately investigate all of the violations that are happening right now and create protections so that this doesn't happen again. Okay, so that's very important. Now, all of this is stuff that depends on political mobilization. It depends on the work of everybody here, not just getting people elected, but holding people to account once they're elected, right? So I just want to say, what I'm talking about is, very much an inside baseball kind of thing. It's really important to have the plans. It's really important to have people inside to implement. It doesn't happen unless there is the political pressure. Otherwise, we know what's going to happen is people will get elected and they'll say, oh, well, I guess we kind of weathered that. Right? And we made that mistake before. So we need continued pressure on stuff like that. So there's institutional rebuilding efforts going on across the government. So think about DOJ, think about Department of Education, think about Department of Labor, which has also been completely gutted, National Labor Relations Board, which was under President Biden the most aggressive National Labor Relations Board, probably since Roosevelt, maybe since Johnson. But I mean, in my lifetime and in the lifetime of a lot of people here, by far the most aggressive pro-worker NLRB, completely gutted. We need to rebuild it. On and on and on. There's a lot of work going on that. There's a lot of work going on transforming the processes of government. Now, this is like the boring stuff. This is not the stuff that you're going to hear the Senate candidates talking about. And if they talk about it, you're not going to vote for them because you're like, you guys got to inspire me with the issues. But it's how the positions on the issues actually get implemented. Okay, so one of the things we found, we moved really quickly on a bunch of stuff under Biden. When we took office, it was in the middle of a really bad time in the pandemic. Now, it's hard to remember right now, but I have very vivid memories of this. Going to work, we weren't allowed into the White House on the first day, on Inauguration Day, because of security issues around January 6th. People were very afraid there was going to be another insurrection on January 20th. But on January 21st, when I walked into a basically empty building, we had, and one of the first things I did is they sent me to get a COVID shot. I was one of the first people I knew to get a COVID shot because I was working in person on these issues. We had these vaccines, but we didn't have an infrastructure for putting them in place. And so one of the things that people had to do was immediately kind of come up with what the infrastructure was. And I give Donald Trump and his people all the credit in the world for getting the vaccine approved in his first administration. I'm just going to say that. But they did nothing to get the vaccines in people's arms. And we really moved to do that. But there were a lot of things that were incredibly pressing that got caught up in process. So also thinking about COVID, one of the issues I was working on from day one, Occupational Safety and Health Administration rules protecting people at work from COVID transmission. Okay, everybody knew this was something we needed to do. There was labor unions had brought litigation against the Trump era OSHA asking them to do it, and it was obviously the thing to do. There was complete commitment to get it done. Do you know when we got it done? We took office January 20th, 2021. It wasn't until November 2021 when we got that rule out. Of course, at that point, the pandemic had gone up and down and up and down, and we had different variants already, and we lost important momentum, which meant both that rule never really went into place, and it gave momentum to the other side, to the National Federation of Independent Business, the business community, the Republican Party, to fight that in the Supreme Court and get it struck down in the Supreme Court. We need to figure out how to move faster. We need to figure out how to move much more effectively, and people are doing that right now. There are lots of rules. There are lots of laws governing this. A lot of this is figuring out how to do stuff that's quick and effective and delivers for people so that they see that what is happening in the governance matters to them, and doing it in a way that the Donald Trump appointed judges won't be able to do anything about. And so that requires a lot of very careful thought right now. Also, as I said, so many people have been fired. Now, there have been some people who've been hired in this administration, have to figure out what to do about that. This is something, I know pretty well. When I worked in the Obama administration, I was part of the initial team in the Civil Rights Division, political appointees in the Civil Rights Division, where I had been a career attorney early in my career. And if you read the papers during the George W. Bush administration, the most politicized part of the Bush administration, and certainly the Justice Department with civil rights enforcement, particularly voting rights enforcement, where they hired a bunch of right-wing lawyers to try to bring cases to suppress the vote rather than protect the vote, which they're trying to do now. And one of my first jobs was actually trying to figure out how to deal with all these people who'd been hired into career civil service positions, but were obviously there to undermine the mission of the agency. We're going to have that, you know, to 3-4 orders of magnitude this time, right? So we have to think about that. But we also have to think about all these people who are gone. The people who were protecting us against bird flu. We were really close to having a bird flu pandemic in 2024. Okay. I was at meetings twice a week where we were following the issues, where we were following the reports about where it was spreading and taking action in various farms around the country, basically to stop it from spreading. All those people, I mean, like 9/10 of those people are gone. Okay. If we have some horrible disease, we are just not being protected against it right now. And if a new Democrat comes into office, they're going to have to hire a bunch of really highly skilled people right away. Well, anybody who's worked in the federal government knows the federal hiring process is for shit. Okay, so I'll say that. I won't say the thing about Jim Comey. But everybody knows that. It takes forever. We don't have that luxury. Right. And so people are thinking right now, well, what are the ways to get a lot of really highly skilled people on board right away to carry out what's going to be the consensus plans of anyone on the Democratic side? We had executive orders under President Biden drafted for day one. I mean, so, you know, literally when I took my job on day one at 12:01 p.m., I picked up the phone and talked to a bunch of people and said, okay, we're pushing out this, we're pushing out this, we're pushing out this. And we need to do that. And we now have seen Trump do that to a much greater degree. We need to be prepared to do that, and we are. So all of those things are being drafted, considered, thought through when we speak. And then the other thing that's going on that's incredibly important is a focus on court reform. I was really happy that folks here asked the Senate candidates their view about court reform. Under President Biden, I mean, look, the court issue, the issue of the courts, was essentially for President Biden an issue of dealing with a tension between his coalition and his personal institutionalism. Right? Everybody, I mean, there was a very strong push within the Democratic Party to do something serious about the Supreme Court in particular. And, you know, he had been the Senate Judiciary Committee chair, ranking member through a bunch of nominations. He just believed too much in the Supreme Court as an institution. He was unable to see or unwilling to see the degree to which the Supreme Court and many of the lower federal courts have become simply partisan right-wing actors. But we can see that. And I think as his administration moved on and we saw so many of our initiatives, so there was Dobbs, right, which, you know, we should have known was coming. But immediately after Dobbs, what does the Biden administration do? Well, we push out a number of protections of reproductive rights, protection of privacy, reproductive privacy under HIPAA, protections of women who are having to have emergency abortions under the EMTALA law, as well as a whole bunch of other protections, protections of medication abortion, protections of contraception. And all of those initiatives are the target of immediate litigation in carefully chosen courts around the country with judges like Matthew Kaczmarek in Amarillo, Texas, who was brought to the court by the pro-life movement in order to do the thing that he did, right? And immediately enjoined nationwide. And what did we do? Well, we fought. We tried to go to the Supreme Court. We got some of these injunctions overturned. We got the denial of approval of mifepristone overturned, although, you know, Fifth Circuit is right back at it last night. But we tried to get the Supreme Court to say you can't have a single district judge enjoin a presidential initiative nationwide. We did that again and again and again. And what did the Supreme Court do? They're like, oh, well, we don't need to consider this issue. Well, the instant Donald Trump says, We want to overturn the protection of birthright citizenship that has been in the Constitution since 1868, right? And a court issues a nationwide injunction against that because it is obviously unconstitutional. There is no serious argument that it's constitutional. Court issues a nationwide injunction. Trump goes to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court all of a sudden discovers it's outrageous that you have a single district court enjoining a presidential initiative nationwide. If they're, look, we can have an argument about whether they're right or wrong about the underlying decision there, but there is no greater illustration of the partisan bad faith of this Supreme Court. And we need to have a concrete reform proposal that's not just they have to have an ethics code. Yeah, they have to have an ethics code. I mean, look at the reporting about Clarence Thomas and all the money he's accepted. They have to have an ethics code. Okay, that's not just what we need. I would urge all of you, if you subscribe to the New York Times, in today's New York Times, there's a terrific op-ed by two professors at Harvard, Nico Bowie and Daphne Renan, about what the Reconstruction Congress did when a conservative Supreme Court tried to stop Reconstruction efforts. Well, what did they do? They changed the size of the Supreme Court. They banned appeals of certain kinds to the Supreme Court. They canceled an entire term of the Supreme Court so the Supreme Court couldn't rule on some of their initiatives. All of these powers are specifically listed in Article 1 of the Constitution, and we need to be having a much broader conversation about how to engage with real reform of this Supreme Court so that they're not standing in the way of democracy. And those are, thank you. And those are among the issues that folks are considering now. So let me just say this. What's going on right now? People want to know, is there going to be a plan? So the problem right now is there are too many plans. There will be plans. And it's okay that there are too many plans right now. If you were to go back 4 years ago to 2022, there was not yet a single Project 2025. Right? This was something that the Republican Party and their coalition had to work out among themselves. And this is something that Donald Trump and the people around him, because Donald Trump was still the acknowledged leader of the party, right, had to ultimately endorse. Well, right now, what do the Democrats have? Well, we are going to have a presidential primary that's going to determine a lot about what are the policies that we're going to run. We know in general what the policies are, but what are we going to prioritize? That's the most important thing. I think the other thing we learned under President Biden was we came in with an incredibly long list of the legislation we wanted. And they were all good pieces of legislation. And we came in an incredible crisis, and we had to respond to the crisis, but we also wanted to treat the crisis as an opportunity. If you look at the American Rescue Plan Act, which I had the privilege to work on, the initial Biden COVID response bill in the spring of 2021, right? You see, this is a criticism of us. I mean, the positive thing is lots of really great policy. The criticism is no choice in prioritizing. And so we had a child tax credit that was made refundable for the first time, that reduced child poverty by half. Okay, reduced child poverty by half. An incredible result. But it was only for 1 year, because in pushing the law through Congress, everybody was concerned about, what's the price tag on the law? What's the CBO score, Congressional Budget Office score, on the law? And if you're going to have a child tax credit that gets half of kids who are in poverty out of poverty, which is an incredible achievement, that doesn't cost nothing, right? I mean, that's a real investment. It's an investment that matters. If you're going to do that for 10 years or make it permanent, it's a lot more expensive, which means there are other things you can't do. And so instead of choosing, basically we said, well, we're going to do all these things just for a shorter time, based on the assumption that, they'll be really popular, and so we'll be able to extend them. And that turned out to, Wasn't popular enough with Joe Manchin was the problem. And so that was a bad bet. So what people need to be doing right now is making the plans, but also prioritizing. And that is something that's happening. And two pieces of that. One, it's just well known. It's easier to tear down than to build up. Right? We know, like, this administration has fired a bunch of people, closed a bunch of offices. Another great thing I would recommend, I mean, if your heart can handle it, is a book that just came out called Into the Wood Chipper, which is a firsthand account by a former senior career appointee at USAID about how Doge destroyed his agency and what that's meant. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people are dead because of that. I mean, this is like serious in the world, but also the way they did that. And you know, Elon Musk said, I took USAID to the wood chipper over the weekend, and it took more than a weekend, but it was not that long. It had taken decades to build up USAID. We don't have decades, right? So we have to figure out how to move faster to build things up, and we can build things up. But the other thing that means is we have to get out of the sort of conventional Washington understanding of what budgeting looks like, of how much money we're spending. You know, the big concern, I published a piece about this a year ago, I think now. The big concern that I had been hearing in these conversations with policy people in DC was, well, we can't hire a bunch more people because that will score as a substantial budget increase, because the baseline that the Congressional Budget Office will use is whatever the then current spending is. And I can tell you, and my reaction was, that is just bonkers. Okay, the baseline should be when the government was working. And we need to be thinking about things in that way. And I can tell you that people are much more thinking about things in that way now. It takes people in Washington, particularly in the Democratic Party, a while to get used to, you know, what is actually happening, how fast things are moving against us, and to adjust to this new reality. But people are adjusted. So there are plans. There are lots of plans. By the time we get to January 21st, 2020, or January 20th, 2029, there will be a single plan to be implemented. I am very confident about that, unless, you know, we make a huge mistake in terms of who we nominate. And I don't have a candidate. I'm not here for a particular person. I think the broad swath of Democratic candidates in 2020, in 2028, will want to move quickly to build a government that works. I think the lesson that people appropriately took from President Biden, which I think, you know, you can criticize the policy legacy of President Biden in various ways, and you can criticize the domestic policy legacy of President Biden in various ways. I will go to my deathbed thinking that the domestic policy of President Biden was the best of any president in my lifetime. I mean, the things that we achieved were incredible. You know, we came as close to universal health care as this country has ever come. The uninsured rate was down to 7%. You know, that's 7% too many. But compared to where we had been just a few years earlier, incredible. We cut child poverty in half. We took a lot of steps to create green energy in this country, to build infrastructure. You know, Haley Stevens talked about the infrastructure law. That was another law I had the pleasure of working on, bipartisan infrastructure law. You know, it really mattered. We did drug price negotiation for the government for the first time, so that the government wasn't forced to take the exorbitant prices that pharma manufacturers were insisting we pay for the drugs. Hugely important. Okay, I many more things I could say, but did people feel that in their lives? No, right? There was inflation. Most of it was COVID plus Ukraine, and we saw that because inflation went back down. And now inflation is way up because of tariffs and the Iran war. But, well, I mean, so, and there was Gaza. That's what I said. I was talking about the domestic policy legacy of the Biden administration. So there was substantial domestic policy that really served the American people. People didn't feel it at all. And so and part of that was about having a uniquely bad communicator as president, you know, I mean, just true. But part of it was about people assuming that if we pass these bills, that people would say, oh, these bills are great. Good policy makes good politics. Well, so the other thing that people are thinking a lot about now in this period is how do we deliver results that people actually feel in their lives? And so I can tell you that there will be people with those plans, and people have thought really hard about this. I'm in a bunch of conversations where people are looking at, well, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what's worked at the federal level, what's worked at the state level, what's worked elsewhere in the world, so that people actually feel the difference of policy in their lives, so that the policy helps to build the political power instead of just being the outcome and then we expect people to be thankful for it, right? And so that's another part of this. So there's a lot going on. I have about 15 minutes left. I'm happy to take some questions. There's a lot going on. And all I can say is all of it depends on the mobilization and organizing of people in this room and the people you know to have the elections come out the right way in 2026 and 2028. People are working really hard on this stuff. None of it matters if we can't win these elections.
I told you you'd feel better. Questions, Connie?
How do you feel about Supreme Court term limits and packing the court, enlarging it?
Yeah, I mean, so I think these are definitely issues that are and should be on the table. So the Supreme Court term limits, there is a pretty broad agreement actually among a lot of people that we should have fixed terms for people on the Supreme Court. You know, that basically we should have fixed 18-year terms so that every president gets 2 nominees. I mean, you know, it is a democratic failure, small d democratic failure, that in my lifetime, the Democratic Party has won the presidency just about as much as almost equally to the Republican Party, maybe more so. And yet, how many appointees have Democrats had to the Supreme Court versus Republicans, right? Republicans have an overwhelming majority of the Supreme Court nominees in my lifetime because of how they time leaving the court. And honestly, because for most of my lifetime, including most of my adult lifetime as a lawyer, the Republican Party understood the power of courts to stymie progressive government in a way that Democrats didn't. Even President Obama, who, you know, I think the world of in many ways, he sort of absorbed this view that the courts aren't that important. And he's right. The courts don't create social change, but they can damn well stop it. And we've seen that over and over. We're coming around to that now. And so, yeah, you know, 18-year terms, I think a lot or are very much on board with that. I would be very much on board with that. You know, I heard Mallory McMorrow earlier today talk about term limits or age limits for the court like we have in Michigan. I think that's something to think about. That's not actually that different from what President Roosevelt proposed, right? His proposal was for every justice over a certain age, we'd add new justice. So we need to think about that. But we need to also think about the jurisdiction of the court. You know, we need to think about what are the issues they get to consider because, again, Congress in Article 1 and Article 3 of the Constitution has the power to determine what issues the Supreme Court can consider. There are a lot of proposals out there saying that the Supreme Court shouldn't be able to overturn legislation without a 2/3 vote. I mean, that's actually been a proposal that folks on the progressive side have put out there since the early 20th century when the Supreme Court was standing in the way of progressive legislation. So I think there are lots of ideas that have to be on the table. But yeah, you know, term limits, you know, that's sort of one of the low-hanging pieces of fruit.
Hi, thank you. I agree with you what you said about Biden's administration doing all those wonderful things. But the average person that I know who isn't very politically aware and they're just having their life really didn't seem to know about them. So are you guys incorporating communication plans, especially up a big level from the past?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is very much part of the conversation. Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's, you know, it's both communications. I think there's this in DC, this default to talking about, well, the problem is communications. I actually think the problem is in part communications, and it's in part thinking about building power. So you have to design policies that build power. You have to design policies that create mobilization. But communications was a big failure. And yeah, people are definitely thinking about that. Yeah.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate what you said so much because as somebody working in the legislature and we're affected so much in fighting the things that the Trump administration is doing, it warms my heart to know that smart people like you are working on it. So thank you. I do want to mention, because I'm a state senator, that the Republican House budget would similarly dismantle our courts in Michigan. And those courts are really important, not just for our everyday, but also to fight the Trump administration. So I just wanted to throw that out there that they're trying to do the same bullshit at home.
Yeah, and the Michigan courts. I mean, many of you heard me say something like this 8 years ago when I was running for Supreme Court, which I am not going to do again. So don't ask me. Okay, I get that question a lot. I'm not going to do again. But I mean, this was my shtick 8 years ago, and like Abdul El-Sayed, I'm still saying it today, which is the state courts are the place where our basic rights are being protected right now. It's where women's rights to control their body are being protected. It's where voting rights are being protected. So yeah, we need to defend our state courts, particularly with the right-wing takeover of federal courts.
Thank you for being here today. If we take back the House and the Senate in November, is there somebody thinking about a Project 2027? I can't wait until 2029.
Yeah, no, I mean, so I have heard a lot of people, yes. So the answer is yes. I mean, you should obviously ask Debbie Dingell that question, who will be right at the tip of the spear on stuff like that. But there are definitely people thinking about, well, what do we do? I've had a number of conversations with, various Hill staff on both sides of the aisle, or on both sides of the Capitol, all Democratic Hill staff about, well, imagine we take over gavels. What are we going to do? And yeah, they're building their list of what to do right now. And so, yeah.
Thank you. We have more questions in minutes. I'm going to ask Gasper, first time visitor.
Hi, Sam, right?
Yes.
Okay, I just had a quick question. For 2027 and 2029, is redistricting a big thing for you guys? Because I heard about it in Memphis. They want to try to redistrict that. And I want to make sure that marginalized folks their voices aren't taken away. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, I mean, so for myself, I think, political reform is incredibly important. And that includes campaign finance issues like Mop Up Michigan, which people ought to be signing the petition for and getting people to vote for. But it also very much includes these issues of redistricting. Unfortunately, where we are right now is the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court first said, we're not going to do anything about partisan gerrymandering, right? They said, we can't do anything about partisan gerrymandering. If you read the Calais decision from this past week, where they gutted what was left of the Voting Rights Act, they didn't just say, we're not going to do anything about partisan gerrymandering. What they said is, actually, partisan gerrymandering is at the center of our system. And so if what a state is doing is partisan gerrymandering, A+ good, and even if that completely dilutes the votes or suppresses the votes of African Americans or Latinos or anyone else, we don't care because it's something that states get to legitimately do, is to partisan gerrymander. And so it's like one of the first principles of the system now. What that's done is that means we're in this arms race where, different states are gerrymandering on different sides. Now, the Democratic Party, that I've been working on these issues for a long time. I helped to write our independent redistricting commission proposal, right? We've been pretty consistent that what we want is a fair system. We don't want partisan gerrymandering on either side. But, we can't have unilateral disarmament right now. And so until we can get to a point where, we can have majorities in both houses of Congress and a president who's willing to do this, to demand that states, if they're going to elect by districts, elect through districts that are created by an independent commission like ours. And it's got to be a real independent commission like the one in Michigan. There are a lot of phony independent commissions out there. Then I think we're just stuck in this gerrymandering cycle. So that's really a 2029 issue, although building the building the groundwork for it is important now.
Next to last year.
Yeah.
Hi, you talked a lot about domestic policy for Project 2029, and obviously that's very important, but I know during the Biden administration, one of the problems, especially in the later years of the Biden administration, was foreign policy. And like I was canvassing and door knocking and phone banking, and I heard so many people like angry about Biden's foreign policy. So like it, and I know I've been frustrated in the past that it seems like on foreign policy, Democrats and Republicans have very similar foreign policy. Is there a plan in place to like improve foreign policy, especially in the Middle East?
Yeah, no, I mean, right. And that was obviously the question I got before. All I can say is, like, I'm a domestic policy guy, so I am certain those conversations are going on. I'm not a part of any of them. I have my own views about those things, but that's not the work that I do. I'm sure those conversations are going on. And, I think people understand how important an issue it has been in creating divisions within our coalition. So, but I can't tell you what those conversations are. Okay, well, that's fair enough.
Thank you for coming. It seems like from looking at what things have happened with Biden and Trump, that policies get wiped out just like that. We need laws, because a law Trump will try to get around the law, but at least stop him enough that you can do something. Policies, he can just say the word and they're gone. So we need more policies. And the other thing I wanted to ask you, in that Presidential Immunity Act, when the Supreme Court, when Jack Smith went and asked the Supreme Court to do something about that right away, the Supreme Court told them they had to go through the procedure. Okay, they went through the procedure. 3 judges wrote a 30-page opinion on it. They said that it didn't have it. Supreme Court sat on it until Jack Smith couldn't do anything about it. Is there anything Congress can do that writes something, some type of legislation that says to the Supreme Court, you have to act? If you send something back to the lower court, you have to act in a timely manner and give them what the timely manner is.
Yeah, so I'll just say about that. I mean, what the Supreme Court did, both substantively and procedurally in the Trump immunity case, I think is an outrage, for all the reasons you're talking about. And this is why I really do suggest everybody read this Nico Bowie and Daphne Renan piece in the New York Times today, because it shows, the important thing is I think there are a lot of institutionalists who will say, well, the courts decided Congress can't do anything about that. It actually shows during Reconstruction, when the court made decisions, Congress pushed back. And when Congress pushed back, eventually the court came around. That's what happened in the New Deal as well. The court invalidated a whole bunch of New Deal statutes. And it wasn't like Congress stopped passing laws. Instead, they just made clear, look, we're going to keep doing what we need to do, what folks elected us to do, and you're going to stop standing in the way of democracy. And eventually, the court understood that they were in a democratically precarious place. And so that's, I think, what we need to have happen now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Thank you all for staying. Thank you all for your questions. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all the questions, but I think Sam will be here for a few minutes. Anyway, I just want to take the last 2 minutes. Okay, don't forget, you can become a precinct delegate stat. John's back there, Dirk's back there. Sign up. Thank yous. Thank you to Hallery and Mallory. I'm sorry, Haley and Mallory. Hallery. It's a long meeting. Haley, Mallory, and Abdul. Thanks to the sheriff's office who worked with us to coordinate with all of their security people and provided security themselves. Thank you to Sam Bagenstos for giving us some hope and insight. Yes, right. Thank you to the program team. Eli Nathans and Annie Somerville is in here somewhere. There she is. Thank you guys for making this happen. Fantastic job. And Annie for getting the room all working for us. I know Mop Up Michigan. Sign for Mop Up Michigan. Dirk and John Notaries, thank you for you. Sydney, thank you to you for doing a wonderful job with the panel. Jim Russo, every single week, month, thank you for being there always. And thank you to all the volunteers who helped us set up and all the volunteers who are going to help us clean up. Thank you very much. Go Blue.